In this video, we're going to do some more examples using loops and functions, classic beginning examples in programming. And after this, between this video and the last couple of videos, we'll have a new lab assignment as well. So first, we'll log into the server. Okay. Before we get started with some new examples, there's a new file, empty.js, in the class directory. It's a reasonable starting point for some of the examples we're using in your assignments for this week and next week. The first line is the use strict that makes JavaScript enforce things a little more tightly than normal. That'll help us prevent some types of errors. And that's in quotes on the first line. Then we're typically going to expect some command line arguments. And here I have an if statement that checks if there's less than 3, then there's no arguments, and then there's a usage statement. So we'll generally change that depending on how many arguments we'll actually expect. And then here is just a loop that prints the arguments. So for a for loop, if you haven't seen for loops before, the general structure is there's an initializer, there's a condition to check, and then there's an increment, and then the function, the for loop body. So starting with I equals 0, as long as I is less than the length of the arguments, go up by 1. This says command equals command plus space plus the argument, the ith argument there. Okay, so that'll chain together all the arguments and put it into a string command, which started off being empty, and then we just print out what the command was. So I'll just demonstrate that. That is with no arguments given, it prints the usage statement, and if I print some number of other ones, it prints them out. So JavaScript program was run. So the first argument is the full path to the node binary, and then the full path to our JavaScript program. So the shell is actually figuring out, putting that whole path in, and then the arguments that we typed. Okay, so I'm going to start that as my starting point for the examples today. And I'm going to put this in the JavaScript more examples directory. So I'll copy empty, and we're going to start off by doing a rectangle. So now I will look at the rectangle. The rectangle program, and I'm going to expect 2 arguments here. I will take that comment out. So what this program is going to do, used like this, node rectangle.js width height. Okay, so if they ran node rectangle.js, say 3 by 4, then we would print something like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So a rectangle with 3 characters wide and 4 characters high. That is the goal. Alright, so now we're going to expect 2 arguments. So if there's less than 4, we give the usage statement. And the usage statement here now is width and height. And those arguments that we're expecting var, say, width equals process.argv bracket 2, because the 0 The 0th argument and the 1th argument are these two, and then the next one is the first real one. And var height equals process.argv bracket 3. These are going to be integers, and anytime we have an integer, if we want the real integer value, we do a parse int with a capital I. And we haven't done a video specifically on math functions yet, but there will be a list of math functions that we're going to be familiar with. So for numbers here, parse int is on our list, and basically it just takes whatever's inside and makes sure that we are using an integer value. So the width here will be an integer, not a string. Okay, now that we have that, we are ready for the rest of the program. And first of all, so we need to do basically two loops, one for the width and one for the height, and it doesn't matter which one we start with. We'll start with the width. So if I have the width there, this is your basic loop that will do something. This repeats width many times. It starts with w equal to 0, and then w goes to 2, 3, 4 as long as it's less than width. And what I want to do is, I want to make a string that okay, so we have w going from 0 up to width. Line starts there, and we'll say each time line equals line plus the star character. Alright, so this will create a line of width many stars. Alright, that's what that does. And now we have something that we should test. So console.log line. Alright, so we should already be able to do this, and we should get a single line printed that's width many stars. So node rectangle, maybe just check to make sure it's enforcing the command line arguments. It is rectangle, and let's say 5, 6. Okay, so let's just check to make sure that's 5 stars long. It is. Alright, and maybe we want to run it with rectangle 2, 3, there's 2. You could ask yourself what happens if we do 0, 0. Is it going to complain, or is it going to not print anything? You could trace through the code, so you could pause right now and think what's going to print. And then I'll run it. I'll hit enter now. There is an empty line printed. If you trace through the code, line is an empty string. W is 0. It goes as long as W is less than the width. If the width here is 0, then already 0 is not less than 0, so this completely doesn't happen at all. And then we print the line. The line is an empty string, so it just is an empty line. Okay, so now we want to do this whole thing, so we want to do this part here some number of times. We have a line that's the right length, and we want to do that how many times? This here. Okay, so var w, let's see, h equals 0, h is less than height, h plus equals 1. This is going to be repeated height many times, and we would have do the print statement. So here we'll have print the right number of lines. So now we should test it out, and maybe it'll already work. 0, 0 still does that. Okay, so now that's actually different than it did before. There was no empty line. And if we take a look at the program, what's changed is this is inside of the loop. and if height is 0, height starts at 0, h goes as long as it's less than 0. So if we have 0 less than 0, that's false. So this actually doesn't happen. And that's probably, I don't know, you could decide what you want to happen when they type 0, but that's a reasonable thing that nothing prints. Okay, so let's try it with, say, 2 by 3. We could try it with, say, 1 by 3. Try it with a width of 3 and a height of 1. So those are all okay. All right, so this would be a correct program now. Just to give a how you would use functions here. So each particular thing, each part of the program that is a well-defined and logical and reasonable part of the program that does a separate thing could be a function. So here, this part here could be a function where we take the width as a parameter, and then anytime we need to do that, we would create the line and return it. Okay, so this makeLine function is available to us, that we give it how wide we want it to be, and it goes ahead and creates the line and returns it. So then here I would say something like var line equals makeLine width, and I can actually use the same variable names here and here, and it'll all work out. But if you prefer to have something different, you could call this, say, L for line. Okay, and you could use a different name for width here as well, but we'll just leave it like this. So this should be correct as well. So all of those are okay. If we want to make it a little bit better designed, we could have another function. So we could have a function print lines, and we could give it the line we want to print as a parameter and how many. So if we did this function, so this would be print the line some number of times. So that's basically going to be this here. Okay, so instead of calling it the height, we would probably call it maybe just I, for I is often used as a counter. Okay, so this does how many times, so how many comes in as a parameter, and this line comes in as a parameter. So then our main program is we make the line, and then we print lines. We're going to print that line, we're going to do it height many times. So the advantage of doing it this way is we broke the program into small logical units. We have a function that makes a line, we have a function that prints a line so many number of times, and then really our main program is just this part right here, and that's easy to read. So if you're reading this, you have the processing the arguments, you have some functions that'll do things, and then this is really what happens is we make a line and then we print it. Just make sure that works. That's still okay. Let's try one of these other ones, maybe 2 by 3. That's still okay. Alright, so this is an example using a for loop where we have this basic structure of initializer, condition to check, and increment. Alright, and we will pause here before we go to our next example. Okay, before we do our next example, we'll do the quiz question for today. This is going to be called loops function examples. The suspense builds, what will it be today? Not a loop. Let's see, maybe loop function. Okay, so the question will be, so much depends upon, and the answer will be a red wheelbarrow, and you can look that up to see what that's about. Alright, so we're done with the by the way, these tilde files are backup files, so you can ignore them. So we're done with the rectangle example. Let's look back. We had ASCII art, okay, so rectangle, fine. Addition table. So I will take the empty JavaScript file and call it addition. And let's take a look there. First we'll make a comment about what the plan is. So here the plan is usage will be something like node addition.js, maybe 6. Okay, we'll just leave it with one parameter, and then if it's run like node, so we'll call this a number. So if it's run like node addition.js and 3, then would print something like 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, and in each spot should be the sum. So 0 plus 0 is 0, 1, 2, 3, and then this should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we want to print something like this, and maybe plus. Okay, so we'll see how close we can get just with using what we know already. So first of all, this empty file was checking for one argument. That'll be fine for us. Now it's going to be addition.js and some number, and we'll have var maxnum equals process.argv bracket, and which one for the first argument. This is something you should just remember. This is the 0, 1, 2. And that's supposed to be an integer, so we'll do parse int. Okay, so first of all, let's work on just printing this line here. So I'm going to go ahead and define a function for that. And we'll call that the header line. Function make header, and we'll give it the max num as a parameter. So just to get started, I'll just return hello and see how we're going to use it. So I'll say var l equals make header console.log l. Okay, so if I run this now, what should be printed? Pause the video and see what you think. Now we'll run it. So I want to do node addition and say 5. Right, so to see what it printed here, it just printed that there is a function called makeHeader, and what is the reason for that? So it's printing L is set equal to makeHeader, but the rule for functions, is that you use parenthesis to call the function. And you're supposed to put in parenthesis the right number of arguments. If you don't, let's see, it runs anyway. So you have to remember this. So this would be the max num. That's what I'm thinking is the max num comes from the command line arguments. We pass that into the header. In any event, we'll get the hello message that says we're at least running the function. Okay, so inside of the make header, I want to make something like this. So I'm going to have a var line equals plus, and at the end we'll return the line, and in the middle we want to create this 0 up to the max num. Okay, so I'm going to have something that goes var say n equals 0, n is less or equal to max n. I'm going to go all the way, so if this max n is 3, I'm going to go all the way up to 3, and n plus equals 1. And instead of plus equals 1, you'll often see plus plus, which does the same thing, that just adds 1 to n. Okay, so what do I want to do here is I want to add to the line. And what do I want to add? Well, I want to add n. And since line is a string, in JavaScript, when you do a string plus an integer, it will just add the string version of the integer. And then I want to add a space as well, so that there's a space in between them all. Alright, let's see what happens now. So that prints just like I wanted it to. Here I had an extra space. If we want to do something like that, we would just put an extra space here. Okay, and then I want to print these rows here. So what I'm thinking is that we have a function. Okay, we have a function make row, and what I want to tell the function is the row number and the max n. Okay, so if I look at, say, row 2 here, first it prints the 2, and then it prints 2, 3, 4, 5, because it's adding 2 to 0, 2 to 1, 2 to 2, 2 to 3, all the way up to the end. So here we're going to have var line equals something. We're going to return the line, and in between we're going to have a loop that is also going to go for var, let's say, column equals 0, column is less or equal to max n, column plus plus, and then we're going to do line equals line plus something. Let's just say 1 plus a space. It'll be just like making the header row, where maybe we're going to start with something different and we're going to add in something different. So what do we need to start with if we're going to row, say, this one? So first of all, let's just add another row. Let's say we do L equals make row 2 and max num, and print that as well, just to see what it looks like right now. Okay, so right now I have a 1. Well, I have a 1 that goes instead of the, so all these, basically all of these, I have a 1 in there because that's just what I'm printing. Okay, but I want to print it to 2 first, which the way the functions work, the 2 gets passed in to this variable here called row. So really what I should do is start it off being row plus 2 spaces, because on the plus I had 2 spaces. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so that, for the 2 part, that would be right. But then here, instead of printing a 1, I should really do 2 plus 0. So really, I should do var value equals column, or we'll say row plus column, and then put that in. So my row comes in as 2, my column goes 0, 1 up to 5, and then in each spot I add my row and my column. Alright, so this make row function seems to be working. Let's go ahead and put some, make the header line plus and then 0 up to max n. Okay, and this is make a row. Row number and then 0, let's see, row plus column for column going from 0 to max n. Alright, so then here we do empty header, and then right now we just have one row. So really what we should have here is a for loop. We really want to do, if we go back up to look at this, we really should do row 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Okay, so that was down here. So we really should do var row equals 0, row is less than max n, less or equal to max n, row plus plus, and then we do this. And if I ran this right now, would it be the correct result? Pause for a second, and then I'll run it. So we do have a loop that's going to print the right number of rows. Let's see. We have a error. Xn is not defined. That was inside of the function. So this is the way functions work, is that the variables that you have inside of there are only alive inside of that function. Out here in the main part of the program, what do we have? We have something called maxnum. Okay, so out here in the main part of the function, we're not inside of this function. We need to call it maxnum is what we have. Let's see again. Okay, so we have our header line, and then we have the row for 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Alright, so what do we need to change to make it correct? This 2 here. So if we call that row, then first it'll be 0, and then 1, and so on. There we go. If you look at the last item here, this 10 is going to potentially be a problem if we keep going, because it takes up 2 character spaces. So let's see if we go to 6. So you can see it doesn't line up quite as well. And so what do we do to fix that? Let me pause to look something up. Let's just go ahead and do it ourselves. So what I would like to do, whenever I print a number here, so the way to solve this problem is these are taking up 2 spaces, and we would like everything else to take up 2 spaces as well so it lines up right. So I want a function to do that. So we'll have function add string, and we'll have a string s and a number of characters we want it to be. So what I want to do here, if s is not numchars long, add spaces. Okay, so that would make it the right length. So what I would like to do is add the right number of spaces. Let me type this in, and you can think about it, see if it's correct. So let's do this in pseudocode. We would have something like var I equals s dot length. So that's the starting length of the string. I is less than numchars. I plus equals or plus plus. So this would start at, let's say the string is 1 character and we want to go up to 2. So we'd start I being 1, and as long as it's less than 2, we're going to do something, and the thing we're going to do in here is s equals space plus s, and then return it. Okay, and this will work as long as we have a way to get the current length of the string, and that's going to be in our list of string functions to remember. Okay, so string methods, we've got length, and it's either just like this, or it's with parentheses. I don't remember. So let's put it like this and see if we get an error message. Okay, so before I put this into the program, I want to do something extra down here at the bottom. So I'll say var s equals hi, and then s equals pad string s, and let's say 5. And then I'll print it. So if this is going to be 5 characters, it should put 3 spaces at the beginning, and we should see those. And if we had a problem with the length function, we'll get an error message. Okay, so there's hi with 3 spaces. We did that all right. So now what I want to do is every time that I would print a number, I need to pad it first. Okay, so that would be in everywhere here, everywhere that there's a number. So there's value that I'm going to print. I really want to pad it. I have the number inside of there. Row plus column is a number. I'd call pad string, so that goes into the s there. S goes a string plus itself. That'll be a string. The only other thing I need is the num characters. So I'm just going to pick 3 for now. So this will work as long as we have 3-digit numbers, which should be fine. We could figure out what the right value is, but let's just do it like that. Okay, so that's in the make row. Now we need to go into the make header as well. There's a number. So this should be pad string there and 3. And if you notice here, I have 2 places that I put 3. So in the header and in the row. Anytime you type the same thing, so if I wanted to change the program to just do 2-digit numbers, I'd have to change this to a 2, and I'd have to change this to a 2. So anytime you do something like that, you really should have a variable to keep track of that, and then you only have to change it once. So I'll say var number width equals equals 3. So that's going to say that we're going to allocate 3 characters for each of our numbers in the pad string. And let's see. Okay, let's the make row. So we need doesn't quite work. So now we need to debug it. How much time do we have? I'm going to pause. Okay, I didn't want to do the debugging process on the video because we're already long enough here. So what was happening there was this pad string, when we're calling it on these numbers here, and so it's a number coming into the pad string, and sometimes the number will be converted to a string when you add it to a string, and other times it won't. So here we're adding an empty space to S, and if S happens to be a number, then JavaScript will just keep it a number. It doesn't add the space. So to make sure that it adds the space and treats this like a string, you can call .toString. So that makes the formatting nice there, and we could, as wide as the screen is, we could make this work. Okay, so we should also do it on the column there, which is on the row here. So we have pad string row number width, and we should also do it on the plus here, so it all lines up nicely. Let's see. Pad string plus number width. Alright, so that's that. So here we had, if you look at this, this is a somewhat involved program now. There's 60 lines, but the way you want to design it is that so each individual part is small enough. If you look at each individual part here, we take the arguments, we have a function to add space to a string to make it line up. That's just a couple of lines. We have a function to do the header, that's a single for loop. We have a function to make one of the rows, that's a single for loop. And then our main program just makes the header and makes each row. Alright, we will call it for this one.